You cut your foot on a sharp stone. No clinic, no antibiotics, no clean white bandage waiting in a drawer. Your skin opens, dirt gets in, and somewhere inside your body, a quiet war begins that could decide whether you live long enough to see the next sunrise. For most of human history, this was not an emergency room story. This was normal life. Your ancestors survived in a world where a bad bite, a deep splinter, a broken tooth, or a fever could turn deadly. So how did they survive without doctors? The first answer is simple. Many did not. Infant mortality was high, infections were dangerous, and a small injury could become a life-ending problem if it reached the blood. But that is only the dark half of the story. The other half is stranger. Your ancestors were not helpless. They had bodies shaped by millions of years of immune defense, minds trained to notice tiny changes in plants and people, and communities that could turn sickness from a private disaster into a shared problem. Before hospitals, your medicine was attention. A modern doctor has tools. A prehistoric band has people. Someone notices that you are limping. Someone sees that your face is too hot. Someone remembers which leaves made a stomach pain worse, which bark numbed an ache, and which stream was safest after rain. Is that medicine? It is not medicine in the modern sense. There is no stethoscope. There is no diagnosis written in a chart. But medicine begins before writing, before chemistry, before anyone understands bacteria. It begins when one person tries to keep another person alive. Archaeologists find this not in ancient medical textbooks, because there were none. They find it in bones. Paleopathology is the study of disease and injury in ancient bodies. In plain English, it means reading old skeletons for signs of pain, survival, healing, and care. And sometimes the bones tell a story that is hard to ignore. At Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq, archaeologist Ralph Solecki excavated Neanderthal remains in the 1950s and 1960s. One skeleton, known as Shanidar I, belonged to a male Neanderthal who had survived serious injuries. His right arm was damaged and likely unusable. He had injuries around the head and face. He may have had limited vision and hearing. Yet the bones show he lived for years after some of these injuries. How does a severely injured hunter survive in Ice Age terrain without help? Not by being magically tougher. Not by pretending pain does not exist. He survives because others tolerate his weakness, share food, slow down, protect him, and allow a damaged body to remain part of the group. That is not a hospital, but it is care. Bioarchaeologist Lorna Tilley has studied what she calls the archaeology of care. Bioarchaeology means using human remains to understand ancient lives. Her point is not sentimental. If a skeleton shows a person survived long after a disabling injury, then someone had to make that survival possible. Food had to reach them. Danger had to be managed. Wounds had to be watched. In a world without doctors, the group itself could become the treatment. This does not mean prehistoric life was gentle. A broken leg could still kill you. A tooth abscess could still poison your blood. Childbirth could still become a life-or-death event. But your ancestors were not wandering alone through a monster-filled landscape with no strategy at all. They had habits, they had memory, they had each other. The second answer lives in plants. Long before laboratories, your ancestors were surrounded by chemicals. Leaves, roots, bark, resins, clays, honey, smoke, ash, animal fat, and heated stones all changed the body in some way. Some soothed, some poisoned, some dried wounds, some reduced pain, some did nothing at all. How would anyone know the difference? Slowly, dangerously, by watching, by tasting, by remembering. At El Cedron Cave in Spain, researchers studied Neanderthal dental calculus, which is hardened plaque trapped on teeth. Dental calculus is disgusting in life, but precious in archaeology, because it can preserve microscopic traces of what someone ate or chewed. Karen Hardy and colleagues found evidence that some Neanderthals had consumed bitter plants, such as yarrow and chamomile. These plants are not high-calorie foods. They are not sweet. They are not the obvious thing you chew when you are starving. So why chew them? One possibility is that they were used for their medicinal effects. That does not mean Neanderthals had pharmacies. It means they may have known that certain bitter plants did something useful to the body. Later work by Laura Weyrich and colleagues on Neanderthal dental calculus reported traces linked to poplar, a tree that contains salicylic acid, the natural chemical family behind aspirin. The same study reported penicillium mold, famous today because a related mold gave modern medicine penicillin. This is not proof that Neanderthals invented antibiotics, but it is a hint that ancient humans and their close relatives interacted with the healing chemistry of their environment far more intelligently than the old stereotype suggests. Now picture the scene. You are sitting near a fire with a swollen jaw. Every pulse in your face feels like a drumbeat. You cannot chew meat properly, and every swallow tastes metallic. An older woman with gray hair tied back has seen this before. She brings bark. She brings a bitter plant. She does not say the word inflammation, because that word does not exist yet. But she knows the pattern. What matters more, the word or the result? Your body also has medicine built inside it. Fever is one example. Modern life often treats fever as an enemy, but fever is one of your body's ancient defenses. A warmer body can make life harder for certain microbes, which are tiny living things such as bacteria and viruses that can cause disease. That does not make every fever safe. High fever can kill. But a mild fever is not random noise. It is your body changing the battlefield. Pain is another ancient signal. Pain makes you protect an injury. Swelling brings immune cells and repair materials to the damaged area. Pus looks horrifying, but it often means your body is fighting infection. The immune system is not a modern invention. It is older than humanity. It is one reason your ancestors survived cuts, bites, parasites, and contaminated food long before anyone knew what germs were. But the body needed help. A wound left dirty could rot. A person left alone could collapse. A feverish child could dehydrate. So survival depended on simple actions repeated again and again. Clean the wound if water is available. Keep flies away. Rest the injured limb. Stay warm. Share food. Watch breathing. Move the camp if the water is bad. These are not dramatic. They are not cinematic. But how many lives were saved by boring care? The third answer is prevention. Your ancestors could not cure everything, so they avoided many things that made sickness worse. Fire changed everything. It cooked meat and plants, making some foods safer and easier to digest. It drove off predators. It created warmth. It also produced smoke, which could irritate lungs, but smoke helped repel insects and preserve food. One technology could protect and harm at the same time. Does that sound familiar? Anthropologist Richard Lee studied the Jew/Hwansi and related San hunter-gatherer communities in southern Africa during the 20th century. His 1960s work did not show a perfect prehistoric time machine, because living communities are not fossils. But it did reveal something important. Foragers often relied on sharing, mobility, and deep ecological knowledge, not constant individual self-sufficiency. If you were sick, the question was not only what plant you knew, it was whether your group fed you while you recovered. James Suzman, who has written about Jew/Hwansi life and the long history of work, describes how survival in hunter-gatherer societies depends on relationships as much as effort. Food sharing reduces risk. Social bonds reduce danger. Knowledge moves through stories, jokes, warnings, and imitation. In a small band, your health is not just your private possession. It is part of the group's survival system. Think about a child with diarrhea. In a modern city, this may mean pharmacy salts, a doctor, and clean water from a tap. In the deep past, it could be deadly. But an experienced caregiver might know which water source had made others sick. They might keep the child close to the fire. They might feed softer food. They might notice whether the eyes were sinking, whether the body was too weak, whether the breathing changed. There is no medical degree. There is observation sharpened by consequences. This is why elders mattered. Not because every old person was a wise healer, but because survival knowledge accumulates. An elder has seen more seasons, more births, more infected wounds, more bad berries, more recoveries that looked impossible. In a world without written records, an old memory could be as valuable as a tool. Polly Wiesner's research on firelight conversations among Jew/Huansi communities shows how nighttime stories are not just entertainment. Around the fire, people tell social stories, myths, warnings, and memories. That matters because knowledge can travel inside narrative. A story about someone who drank from the wrong place after a storm is also public health. A joke about a foolish hunter who ignored a swelling bite is also medical education. Before textbooks, your ancestors had story. Now, reconstruct one bad day. You wake before dawn with pain in your thigh. 2 days earlier, a thorn went deep into your skin while you were gathering wood. At first, it was annoying. Now the area is red, tight, and hot. You feel weak. Your mouth is dry. The group is preparing to move. What happens next? Someone checks the wound. Someone presses around it and watches your face. Someone brings water. Someone heats a sharp stone or a bone tool near the fire, not because they understand sterilization as a modern scientific concept, but because heat is associated with cleaning, cooking, and transformation. Someone helps drain the wound if it is full of pus. Someone gives you a place near the fire. Someone else carries more of the load that day. No one calls it medicine. But your chance of survival has changed. This is the counterintuitive twist. The biggest prehistoric medical technology may not have been a plant, a stone tool, or a secret ritual. It may have been tolerance for dependency, the willingness to feed someone who could not feed you back today, the patience to let the injured slow the group down, the emotional intelligence to notice distress before it becomes collapse. In other words, one of the oldest medicines was not a substance, it was care. That idea challenges a modern myth. Modern culture often imagines ancient survival as brutal individual strength. The toughest hunter lives, the weakest disappear. But the bones keep interrupting that story. Injured people survived. Disabled people survived. Children survived because adults carried them, fed them, and watched them for years. Human beings did not conquer the world by becoming solitary machines. Your ancestors survived because they were vulnerable together. Of course, ancient care had limits. No one could repair a shattered skull with modern surgery. No one could stop sepsis once infection overwhelmed the body. No one could replace insulin, perform a safe organ transplant, or treat many diseases that modern medicine now manages every day. Romanticizing the past would be a mistake. Prehistoric medicine was impressive, but it was not magic. The deeper truth is more interesting. Your ancestors survived without doctors because they had layers of defense, a powerful immune system, practical plant knowledge, fire, rest, observation, shared food, elders, stories, group protection. None of these was enough alone. Together they formed a rough, fragile, living medical system. And some of that system still lives inside your day. When you bring soup to someone who is sick, you are doing something ancient. When you tell a friend to rest, you're using an old form of medicine. When a parent touches a child's forehead, watches their eyes, and decides something is wrong, that gesture is older than writing. Modern hospitals are extraordinary, but care did not begin there. Today, you live in a world of scans, vaccines, antibiotics, and emergency rooms. Those things save lives your ancestors could not save. But your body still swells, burns with fever, clots blood, and cries out in pain using systems far older than civilization. Your need for care is not a weakness added by modern life. It is part of being human. You cut your foot on a sharp stone. And now, the real question is not how ancient humans survived without doctors. It is how many of them survived because before there were doctors, there was someone close enough to notice.